Hello everyone, today in this video we'll fight against the atmospheric world around us, and today we will come back to one of the old good traditions on this channel. I mean the book reviews. The book I just finished reading today was short but very good. This was book from one of my favorites, one of my favorite series published by the Osprey publisher, and now the topic was the Khazars. Yes, Khazars, the Judeo-Turkic nomadic empire in the territory of Eastern and Southeast Europe from the 6th until 11th century AD. And we know that at one point, I mean maybe 7th century seemingly, Khazars, at least their elite, ruling elite, converted into Judaism. Yeah, they were not Jews, they were Turkish, but we should remember also that some of the barbaric tribes that opposed early Islamic conquest in northern Africa also worshipped Judaism, like Queen Dakia or Dakhla, different versions of her name. And we should remember that more or less till until 11th century AD, Jewish were converting other nations into Judaism as well. Seljuks, before they converted to Islam, they were also followers of Judaism. We should remember that. Also Turkish people. So, Khazars actually created very interesting empire which lasted in its big form more than 300 years, which is very long for such nomadic and semi-nomadic society that is also that also comprise many other hordes and many other tribes and nations, and they were fighting against Byzantines, Arabs, Kievan Rus. They were actually eventually defeated by Kievan Rus and so on and so on. Some of these fightings are described in this short book by Mr. Mikhail Zhoranov, a Russian origin historian from Ukraine, and of course David Nicol, author, very author of many good works about military history, especially in Osprey, and the creator of the nice pictures, drawings in this book was Krista Hook, the British illustrator, historical illustrator. And what I can say, of course, companies are briefly described. Art of War of Khazars is also nicely described in this book. And what I like that Mr. Zhiranov and other co-authors reject the fantastic claims of some really suspicious people like Mr. Arthur Kustler, a Hungarian Jewish emigree to UK and actually Soviet spy, seemingly, who published in 1976 his famous essay 13th Tribe, in which he was claiming that Ashkenazi Jews are not descended from ancient Israelites, but they are descendants from Turkish Khazars and other members of Khazar horde who converted in the early medieval period into Judaism. Of course, it's nonsense, it's really nonsense, and this view doesn't survive the critics because Jewish communities were in Europe even before Khazars in southern Europe and in Frankish kingdom, in Moorish Spain and so on. And we know, of course, that some Jews emigrated to Khazar Khaganate, so empire, when it was existing, like from Persia and so on. But claiming that all Ashkenazi Jews come from the Turkish Khazars, it's simply nonsense, taking into account that most likely the converts to Judaism was only the elite of the Khazar Khaganate, and that's it. And so it was really absolute minority of people who were living in Khazar Khaganate through its own turbulent and very interesting history. So we have to say that the fringe theory of Mr. Arthur Küstler was rejected in this book, which I really like, despite the fact that his essay 13 Tribe, if we reject this theory, is nicely written. One can read it as the example of essays that can be really misleading because they are nicely written, even can be convincing for people who do not know history. And we have to remember that Mr. Küstler published this essay because he was hoping to finish anti-Semitism, to show that Jews, especially Ashkenazi Jews, are not fully Jews but Turkish people who are following some Judaism principle, which is completely, as I said, nonsense claim in the lights of history. And we also need to remember that Mr. Küstler was communist and seemingly Soviet agent. And this was what is most important, is that at the end of 1970s, the view of Khazars and the role of Khazars in the early medieval history of lands that later became lands of Russia and Kievan Rus, the view of Khazars changed, and they became a synonym of parasites and actually oppressor forces, explorators of poor Slavic shortcut Russian people, and so on. And since then, in internet we can find many strange theories about allegedly Khazars who exist today. They are actually enslaving people, ruling the world, and so on and so on. And post-mortem, Khazars, at least the name of Khazars is making great career in different environments, which are really feeding themselves with fringe theories about Khazars and how bad Khazars allegedly are, not knowing the fact that their history was a little bit more complex, and they were actually a relatively tiny group of warriors in big steppe empire worshipping Judaism, but they were not Jewish people, and actually they didn't survive for too long the collapse of their empire. Nevertheless, the book Khazars, Judeo-Nomadic Empire by Mr. Zhiranov and David Nicol, illustrated by Krista Hook, is worth reading, as in most cases, majority of publications of Osprey in the military history. All the best, have a nice day, bye.